Joining us right now is David Elia, the Chief Executive Officer of HOSTPLUS. And great backdrop you've got there, David. I've actually used that photo on our Wayfarer news letter a couple of weeks ago. I know they half blanked out the British Airways logo on the back and missed the bottom of it. But
we try and hide that. Well, firstly, great to be with you, James. And I should actually declare I'm here in Queensland. I'm one of the lucky Victorians that's managed to get out. I am in hotel quarantine, so hopefully this link ensures that it maintains itself, and hopefully we can get this interview done.
No, but thank you so much for your immense support. You've been supporting the event since the very inception, and which was some 11 years ago. So thank you so much for that. And it's obviously a very crucial time, David, isn't it, in terms of what's going on in the superannuation industry? I mean, how much has COVID impacted that?
Well, I mean, COVID's impacted us all in so many different ways, hasn't it? We've seen the tragic consequences, obviously, for some, including the loss of life. We've seen businesses that have been shuttered. We've seen reduced household incomes. We've seen reduced business income. It's the first recession that we've had in 29 years. So, the economy's taken a tremendous hit. It's been a roller coaster ride for many of our members. They certainly endured a significant hit to their superannuation savings and their accounts in March, and then we saw a significant rally in equity markets. Unfortunately for some of those members, and we've seen this in the past, they decided to switch out of some of the existing options that they were in, move into more conservative options, which has obviously been less ideal for them, and it's meant that they've obviously taken realised a substantive hit to their savings accounts. But I think the big change that we've seen, certainly in the superannuation sector, has largely been about superannuation regulation, and it's been all about the early release scheme. We've seen in excess of 3 million Australians tap into the early release scheme. In excess of $30 billion has already been paid out. The government's forecast it would be somewhere upwards of about $42 billion. Just to provide some perspective on that, I mean that's equivalent to the JobKeeper payments. So the superannuation industry has certainly provided a tremendous fiscal stimulus, and certainly in HostPlus's case, and if I can just focus a little bit about that, we've paid out in excess of $2.8 billion so far to 300,000 HostPlus members. What I'm incredibly proud of is that we've managed to pay those payments out, at least 97% of those within 5 business days. It's been a tremendous effort to obviously try and get that money out to those members as quickly as possible. And, we're still sitting on cash reserves of in excess of $4 billion at the moment.
And David, when you talk about those numbers, about 300,000, what kind of percentage would that be out of your total members at the moment?
So HostPlus has got 1.3 million members. What's interesting about those numbers is that of that 300,000, 100,000 had actually made a second claim.
Okay.
So they've double dipped. So they've gone back twice in that regard. I have to declare, I mean, whilst look, it's been an important part, I think, of the government's response in terms of providing some element of fiscal stimulus. The reality is that we've also seen, just under 40,000 members that have completely wiped out their superannuation savings account. So it's been tremendous to try and assist where possible, but at the same time, it's been a bit disappointing to see some of these members having to tap into their superannuation accounts and effectively wipe out whatever savings they had.
No, of course. I think an interesting stat on that, David, like you just said, is it's the amount that actually have re-dipped in again. So it's not 100% of the people have gone back in. It's a smaller amount. So what do you think is going to happen over the next 12 months then? I mean, there's no more dipping at this point, obviously beyond September. So what's your take on the next 12 months then for the super industry?
Yeah, well, there was effectively 37,000 of those members that couldn't dip again because they effectively wiped out their superannuation account balances during the first tranche of the early release scheme. But look, I think most of us would know, I mean, COVID has a long way to play. Governments around the world are dealing with a whole set of, of different circumstances, various unknowns. As I've mentioned, certainly in our case, in the superannuation industry, what the government's effectively done is brought really, delivered an element of regulatory uncertainty around superannuation policy. They have already extended the early release scheme, for those that don't know, until the 31st of December of this year. And frankly, we need to plan for a scenario where it could be extended even further. So whilst I think it's important, and superannuation's played an incredibly important part in terms of the economic stimulus, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the purpose of superannuation, and that is to provide for people's retirement over the longer term.
And obviously it's been a challenge, David, as well for employers as much as employees. And how have you been assisting employers through this period as well?
Yeah, well, look, we know, firsthand, and I see it through the numbers, that, certainly employers in our industry have really borne the brunt of COVID-19 response. I don't think I have to reiterate that point to a lot of the people that obviously are at this particular conference. I know that they're all hurting. They're all searching for answers as to what the future ultimately looks like. And I should just make the point. I think it's thanks to, all of you, all our contributing employers through the superannuation guarantee contributions over the years, that many Australians, including 300,000, HOSTPLUS members, have been able to keep their head above water by accessing these funds through the early release scheme, right? So a bit of a pat on the back to all those employers. Look, the reality is that we've been doing a hell of a lot, and I think it does certainly come back to, increasing our level of communication with employers. We've provided certainly important and regular updates. My CIO, Sam Cecilia, who's known to many of you, and we've hosted numerous Zoom sessions with our employers, industry partners. We're providing updates on the market, on HostPlus's performance. We've sent out numerous amounts of communications to our employers, to our members, useful information on the website about superannuation changes, JobKeeper, JobSeeker. We've got a dedicated group of account managers across Australia who've also been trying to do their bit. But ultimately, what we are endeavouring to do is that we're readying ourselves. It's the superannuation industry that helped recapitalise corporate Australia during the height of the global financial crisis, and it's the superannuation industry that will kickstart the recovery, the much-needed recovery in the economy. So it's funds like HostPlus, who've been pioneer investors in infrastructure, like the airport that you see behind me. We will be the key driver of economic activity, economic revival, and we're certainly ready to play our part.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. Obviously, the COVID's obviously changing investment strategies, but a lot of volatility in markets, David. So how much has it changed your strategy, and what are you looking at now as from a sector standpoint, and where's a good place to put investments at the moment?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is that, HostPlus is one of the largest pension funds in the country, in fact, one of the largest in the world. During this particular period, notwithstanding, obviously, the almost $3 billion that we've paid out in early release scheme, HostPlus is an incredibly well-diversified superannuation fund. So more than half of the membership is now drawn from members outside of the superannuation industry. And that's a really, really important point to make, because what that's basically allowed us to do, it's allowed us to continue to invest. We are net cash flow positive. The fund put on in excess of $4 billion over the course of the last 12 months. That money is finding its way back into the real economy. So, from our perspective, we don't see any changes to that. Clearly, we need some element of certainty around superannuation policy. The fact of the matter is that we are holding much higher levels of cash than certainly I would like. $4 billion in cash, and we can get access to more cash if need be. But ultimately, cash just sits there and it's not earning much. So our preference is to really redirect a lot of that cash that's sitting there, the ongoing contributions that we're receiving, into the real economy, creating real jobs. But we will need some element of, policy certainty. And I don't have to tell anyone that, superannuation, I think every day I pick up the paper, there's a view about what should be done with superannuation. We should use it for an ATM, frankly, to fund everything. That's not the purpose of superannuation. We've got to get back to the basics, and that's giving us the opportunity to invest back into the real economy.
And from an investment standpoint, David, concerns about obviously when JobKeeper does come off next year, any concerns around that time as well?
Well, clearly, concerns insofar as, we're going to see a reduced level of contributions flowing into the entire system. That's clearly a function of employment. So we really do need to get the economy kick-started again. There's been some comments made about, obviously, border restrictions. I understand, obviously, that tough decisions have been made with regard to ensuring that this virus doesn't get out of control. But the reality is that we've got to open up our economies, and the way we do that is by effectively opening up our borders. HOSTPLUS is well positioned to continue to make those types of investments. We're already pioneer investors in areas such as venture capital. You've heard us talk a little bit about that. In fact, for the listeners, I'm proud to say that HOSTPLUS has over $500 million invested in CSL, which is obviously one of the companies that's been selected by the federal government in relation to the COVID virus vaccine. So, we're certainly playing our part, and we just hope that we can stick to our long trusted investment strategy that's delivered great outcomes for our members.
And David, before we let you go, obviously on a very positive note, the performance of HOSTPLUS and over the past decade and more has been very, very impressive, and literally one of the best super funds in the country year on year on year. And obviously that obviously makes you feel a bit more confident, isn't it, with some of the members about going forward through this period?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've become a superannuation of choice, not just for people, for workers in the hospitality tourism industry, but across Australia. And as I said, I mean, that brings enormous amount of strength. Diversity is important, obviously, in terms of what we do. So having some dependency, obviously, on ongoing contribution flows is absolutely important. But the fund's been a leading investment performer, top quartile over 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, that's fantastic, but the reality is that don't judge us, obviously, on past performance. We've got a job to do, and that's to continue to grow the retirement benefits of our members. And so for us, it's really more about looking forward and continuing to carve out and identify investment opportunities that, as I said, deliver the dual role of great returns for our members, but also impacting the real economy, which is incredibly important for our sector.
Absolutely. And David, once again, thank you for your immense support of AHICE. We wouldn't be able to do it, obviously, without the support of you. And thank you very much. And please keep safe and well.
Thanks, James. Great talking to everyone.
Thank you.